Since the moment we opened our eyes to the world, we were fed the same story, that everything we desire, happiness, love, success, peace, lies somewhere out there, that we must chase, strive, and sacrifice to earn it. That fulfillment lies just around the next corner, after the next achievement, in someone else's arms, in a job title, in the applause of a room that barely knows our name. And so we run. We run without rest. We build entire identities around the pursuit, believing the more we do, the more we'll become. But no one tells you that sometimes the faster you chase, the further you drift from yourself. Because here's the truth we were never taught. Real power doesn't come from the chase, it comes from presence. The kind of presence that doesn't beg for attention, but commands it without trying. The kind of presence that doesn't prove, doesn't perform, doesn't hustle for belonging, but simply is. There's a point in your life when you begin to notice something strange. The more you run after people, the more they pull away. The harder you try to force the outcome, the messier it becomes. And the moment you stop, the moment you slow down, breathe, root yourself in your own energy, that's when things begin to shift. That's when the right people appear without you searching. That's when opportunities come not because you shouted, but because your silence started echoing louder than your noise ever could. Chasing is often a symptom of forgetting your own value. You chase when you don't believe you are the thing worth arriving for. But your presence, when you finally realize it's enough, becomes a gravitational field. It doesn't pull from lack, it draws from depth, from alignment, from something real. So if you've been running, exhausting yourself, trying to be enough, trying to be seen, loved, chosen, pause. Not because you're giving up, but because you're finally waking up. Because maybe what you've been searching for in the world has been waiting all along quietly within you. Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But most people never get there because they never stop playing the role they were handed. They confuse the persona with the person. They build a mask so perfect, so polished, that even they forget it's not real. The persona is what we show the world. It's the smile when we're breaking, the agreement when we want to scream no, the charm we wear like armor to survive environments that never saw us. But the self, the true self, is something much quieter. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to perform. It simply exists, rooted, watching, waiting for the moment we are brave enough to come back home. Jung called the journey to meet this self-individuation the slow, often painful process of peeling back the layers of illusion to reveal the original soul underneath. It's not a path of becoming more, it's a return, a remembering, a reconnection with what the world tried to make you forget. Self-realization isn't about achieving anything new. It's about aligning what you feel inside with what you allow to exist on the outside. No more pretending, no more shrinking to be liked, no more saying yes when your whole body screams no. And this shift changes everything, because the moment you begin to live as your whole self, your energy rearranges the room before you even speak. You become magnetic, not for what you wear or say or do, but because you're finally real. There's no tension, no hidden agenda, no gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. That's the kind of power no one can teach you. That's the kind of presence that doesn't chase, it draws in. So many people go their whole lives trying to impress others, win affection, or prove their worth. But the real work, the deeper work, is in letting go of the mask and allowing your essence to rise. That's what Jung meant. Not a better version of you, a truer one. A you that doesn't beg to be seen because she already knows she is. And when that version of you leads, everything else begins to follow. We live in a world addicted to noise. Movement is celebrated. Hustle is glorified. If you're not constantly achieving, evolving, producing, you're labeled lazy, lost, or behind. So we learn to fear stillness. We mistake it for stagnation, for weakness, for irrelevance. But stillness is not the absence of motion, it's the presence of power. The kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. Magnetic, rooted, undeniable. Society never taught us this, because stillness can't be commodified. It doesn't make noise. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't try to prove itself. But stillness holds what the chase never could: clarity, magnetism, and alignment. Stillness is where you begin to hear yourself again, not the voice you perform with, but the one buried beneath the expectations, the one that whispers truth, even when the world screams otherwise. There's something quietly revolutionary about a woman who no longer rushes, a woman who pauses before answering, who thinks before acting, who no longer runs after anything, but watches what comes to her. In that silence, in that presence, she becomes impossible to ignore, because stillness creates a different kind of attraction, not from effort, but from essence, from knowing who you are and being unapologetically anchored in it. When you stop reacting to everything, when you learn to breathe before you speak, walk into a room without needing to dominate it, that's when people start to lean in. Not because you're louder, but because your energy is clean. When you are still, you become the eye of the storm. The chaos moves around you, but never through you. And that kind of presence doesn't just attract, it transforms. So if they told you stillness was weak, passive, pointless, forget that. Stillness is a container, a crucible, a force field. It's where presence lives, and presence, once awakened, doesn't chase. It draws in everything meant for you, without force, without fear, without a single wasted breath. There was a time when you needed to be seen, needed the compliment, the approval, the attention, not because you were shallow, but because somewhere inside you hadn't seen yourself yet. So you reached. You twisted yourself into shapes that pleased others. You watered down your truth to stay likable. You offered your soul in exchange for a few moments of acceptance, and it worked until it didn't. Until the applause felt hollow, until the compliments felt conditional, until you realized that no matter how much validation you gathered, the emptiness inside remained untouched. That's the burnout. No one talks about the emotional exhaustion of living for other people's eyes. Validation seeking becomes a prison, and the more you feed it, the more it starves you. But then something shifts. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, you start to turn inward. You begin to sit with yourself, not to judge, not to fix, but simply to witness. And that witnessing, it changes everything, because presence isn't just how others experience you, it's how you experience yourself. And when you can sit in silence with your own thoughts, with your own shadow, with your own light, without needing to escape, distract, or explain, you begin to touch something sacred. You become your own mirror, your own witness, your own source of enoughness. That's the turning point. When being seen by others becomes less important than being known by yourself. When the hunger for validation is replaced by the peace of authenticity, it's not arrogance, it's alignment, and people feel it. They sense when a woman is no longer seeking approval, because she already has her own. Her energy stops asking, "Do you like me?" and starts saying, "This is who I am." And that shift? That's where real power lives, because when you truly witness yourself fully, gently, truthfully, your presence becomes a lighthouse. Not everyone will come to it, not everyone can. But the ones who do won't just see you, they'll feel you. And when you've seen yourself like that, the world never looks the same again. There's a part of you that you've hidden, not because it's ugly, but because somewhere along the way, someone made you believe it was. The anger, the jealousy, the fear, the wildness, the softness, the need. These are the pieces you were told were too much or not enough, and so you buried them deep. You became what was safe, acceptable, digestible. But what you repress doesn't disappear. It waits. Jung called this the shadow, the collection of all the parts of yourself you deny, disown, or are too afraid to face. And here's the truth: no one teaches you. What you avoid in yourself becomes what controls you. The shadow doesn't sit quietly. It shows up in your triggers, your projections, your patterns. It leaks through the cracks when you least expect it. You think you're being good, but really, you're being fragmented. You think you're in control, but really, you're at war with yourself. Real presence, the kind that transforms a room, can't exist while you're split in half. You can't fully arrive anywhere if parts of you are still locked in shame, so the work is integration. It's not about fixing yourself, it's about including yourself, letting the light and the shadow coexist, sitting with your mess without judgment, holding your contradictions with compassion. Because presence isn't perfection, it's wholeness. And when you stop hiding the parts of yourself you were taught to fear, you begin to radiate something rare. You become real. And that realness, people feel it. It's what makes your presence magnetic, not your perfection but your honesty. The unspoken signal that says, I've met myself in the dark and I'm not afraid of yours. That's the kind of energy that changes lives. So, if you want to be fully present, you must first be fully accepting. Not just of what you love about yourself, but of everything you were taught to exile. Because when you allow all of you to exist without shame, something powerful happens. The world begins to meet you in that same truth. Not the version you curate, but the one you are. And in that moment, you stop hiding and finally start living. We've been taught that presence means being impressive, that to matter, we have to shine, entertain, or prove our value in some visible, curated way. So we perform. We rehearse our words, posture our emotions, shape ourselves into what we think will be loved. And for a while, it works. We get the claps, the nods, the attention. But over time, something inside us starts to ache, because performance is exhausting. It drains the soul to constantly monitor your tone, your face, your steps like you're always on stage, even in your own life. That's not presence, that's survival. Presence is what happens when you stop performing. When you walk into a room without needing to be liked, validated, or understood, and still carry the weight of your own being. True presence is subtle. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply exists, rooted in self-knowing. And that energy? It ripples. It speaks louder than any speech ever could. There is a profound difference between being impressive and being felt. And the world may applaud the former, but it's the latter that truly connects. The persona is what the world sees. Presence is what the soul emits. And when you finally get tired of adjusting, of shrinking, of editing yourself for the sake of approval, you begin to touch something pure. You realize that being enough was never about what you could perform. It was about what you could own, the quiet dignity, the calm certainty, the grounded truth of someone who no longer needs to wear a mask to be seen. And yes, it's vulnerable to stop performing. It's raw. It's unfamiliar. But it's also freeing, because presence doesn't ask you to be anything more than what you are in this momentous, whole human. That kind of presence doesn't fade when the lights go off. It lingers, it marks, it awakens. And the most beautiful part? When you stop performing, you make space for others to stop too. You become a permission slip for authenticity. A living reminder that worth isn't earned through applause, it's remembered in stillness, in breath, in being. And that's when life starts responding, not to the act you've perfected, but to the truth you've finally allowed to speak. There's a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when something shifts inside you. You stop chasing, not out of bitterness, not because you gave up, but because something deeper awoke, a knowing, a calm, a clarity that whispers, I don't need to run after what's already mine. And the moment you stop chasing, your energy changes. It softens, deepens, grounds. You no longer move from lack, from urgency, from the ache of not enough. You begin to radiate presence instead of need, attraction instead of effort, and others feel it before you do. Your aura expands, your interactions shift. People begin to respond to you differently, not because you became more, but because you finally became still. You're no longer grasping for attention, love, success. You're becoming the space where those things naturally want to land. This is the untold magic of alignment. The world meets you at the level you've met yourself. When you live in self-doubt, life echoes it back. When you root in self-trust, everything begins to mirror that stability. Conversations get deeper. Invitations come without you asking. The ones who ignored you start paying attention, but now you see them clearly. Because the shift wasn't in them, it was in you. From needing to be chosen, to choosing yourself. From hoping to be noticed, to being undeniable without saying a word. And you realize something liberating. Chasing never brought you closer to what you truly wanted, it just distracted you from remembering who you already are. There is a grace that settles into your life when you stop running. A grace that turns your presence into a lighthouse, a frequency that draws in what's real and filters out what never was. It's not magic. It's energy, it's embodiment, and it begins the moment you decide you're no longer available for anything that requires you to abandon your truth. So, stop chasing. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do. Enough to protect your energy. Enough to become the kind of person who doesn't wait to be chosen because she knows she already is. There is a different kind of charisma the world rarely teaches. It's not loud, it's not polished, it doesn't sparkle with rehearsed confidence or calculated charm. It's quiet, rooted, undeniable. It's the magnetism of someone who has met their own shadow and stayed. Someone who no longer needs to prove they are whole because they've already integrated the pieces they once tried to hide. That's the power of the integrated self, not perfect, not untouchable, but deeply present, emotionally regulated not because they never feel, but because they no longer fear what they feel. They've stopped outsourcing their peace, and when that kind of person walks into a room, something shifts. You feel it. The grounded calm, the steady gaze, the absence of pretense. You breathe easier in their presence, because you sense they are not performing, not projecting, not pretending. And in a world of chaos and noise, that calm becomes magnetic. We're drawn to what feels safe, not in the sense of control, but in the sense of truth. When someone is congruent, when their inner and outer worlds match, you trust them. Not because they told you to, but because their energy makes your nervous system exhale. That's the true source of presence, inner congruence. A woman who is at home within herself doesn't need to dominate a space. She grounds it. She becomes the anchor, and in that stillness, in that emotional sovereignty, she becomes unforgettable. Because charisma that comes from ego fades, but the kind that comes from deep embodiment, that lingers, that heals, that leads without trying. So no, you don't need to be louder to be heard. You need to be real. You don't need to stand out. You need to stand in your truth, in your wholeness, in your regulated, radiant self. That's what draws people in. Not the performance, not the packaging, but the peace. And once you've accessed that kind of presence, you'll never chase another spotlight again. You'll realize you are the light, calm, magnetic, whole. They taught you that choosing yourself was selfish, that putting your needs first meant you didn't care, that boundaries were walls, not wisdom. So you kept giving, you kept dimming, you kept pouring yourself into cups that never once paused to ask if you were thirsty too. But one day, something inside you snapped gently, firmly, finally. And you realized, choosing yourself isn't betrayal, it's reverence. It's an act of spiritual respect, not just for who you are now, but for the woman you fought to become. The one who's cried in silence, risen from heartbreak, carried generations of weight on her shoulders, and still shows up with open hands. You are not selfish for protecting her, you are sacred for remembering her. Presence doesn't beg. It doesn't seek permission. It doesn't knock on closed doors hoping someone will finally let it in. Presence knows where it belongs. And that knowing is a quiet rebellion. A refusal to abandon yourself just to be accepted by those who only love watered-down versions of you. Choosing yourself is not about pushing others away, it's about no longer pulling yourself apart. It's about honoring the yes inside your chest, even when the world is asking for your no. And when you begin to live this way, something sacred unfolds. Your life starts to align. Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. Authored by your own hands, rooted in your own truth. You stop chasing love and start embodying it. You stop shrinking in rooms that feel too small and start building spaces that can hold your full expansion. And in that shift, you stop asking, "Will they choose me?" Because you already have. Again and again, and that choice becomes your compass, your center, your clarity. So no, choosing yourself is not selfish. It's survival turned into sovereignty. It's the way back home to the only place that has never left you. You. There's something no one tells you about becoming whole. Not everyone will celebrate it, because the moment your presence becomes real, undeniable, embody it starts reflecting back what others don't want to see. You stop being a person. You become a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. To some, your calm will feel threatening. To others, your boundaries will feel like rejection. Your joy will stir their shame. Your confidence will poke at their insecurity. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your light now exposes what they've kept hidden. And this is the paradox of becoming. You start attracting and repelling at the same time. Some people will be drawn to you like a flame in the dark because your presence gives them permission to be more of themselves. Others will pull away because your authenticity demands that they meet themselves and they're not ready. That's not your fault. It's just what happens when truth walks into a room. You become the reflection of what others crave and fear. You remind them of their potential and of everything they've abandoned. And that's not easy to hold. It's lonely sometimes, confusing. But it's also powerful, because when you stop shape-shifting for comfort and start standing in your wholeness, the people who can't meet you where you are begin to fall away. And the ones who can, they find you like a frequency they've been tuning into their whole lives. You don't have to explain yourself to be felt. You don't have to shrink to be safe. You simply have to stay true. The mirror you hold is not a weapon. It's a gift, a revelation, a signal to others that it's possible to be whole, to live integrated, to love without losing yourself. And some will look away. But others will rise. And when they do, you'll know. Your presence isn't just for you. It's an invitation, a mirror, a light in the fog. There comes a point in your evolution when explaining starts to feel like bleeding. You speak your truth and watch it get dissected. You open your heart and feel it reduced to a theory, a debate, a dismissal. And eventually you understand. Some things are not meant to be explained. They're meant to be embodied. Because when you're fully anchored in your being, rooted in your knowing, words become secondary. Your energy speaks first. Your presence tells the story before your mouth ever opens. And the people meant to hear it do. Explaining is what we do when we seek approval. When we doubt that our truth is enough on its own. But embodiment? Embodiment doesn't ask for agreement. It doesn't perform. It radiates. It invites. It declares, not in volume, but in vibration, "This is who I am. This is what's true. I don't need you to understand. I only need to remain whole." And that shift is sacred. You move from defensiveness to divinity. You stop exhausting yourself, trying to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop arguing with rooms your soul never belonged in. Because the truth is this: your alignment speaks louder than any justification. Your presence becomes your message. Your boundaries become your language. Your silence becomes your strength. There is a deep, powerful form of communication that happens when you simply embody your truth. No explanations, no disclaimers, no dilution, just full, unapologetic being. That's the kind of truth people feel. It lands in their chest before it reaches their mind. It bypasses logic and touches something ancestral, something real. And not everyone will get it. Not everyone is ready for embodied energy. But the ones who are, they won't need you to explain a single thing, because they'll see it in your posture, feel it in your presence, hear it in your quiet. And in that stillness, you'll remember, you were never here to convince anyone. You were here to become. And now, finally, you are. Deep inside you, two rivers flow, one wild, one steady, one soft, one focused, one intuitive, one decisive, the feminine, the masculine, anima, animus. Jung knew that every soul holds both, and that true presents, the kind that radiates, balances, heals, comes not from choosing one, but from integrating both. You've been taught to over-identify with one side. Maybe you learned to survive by leaning into the masculine structure, control, direction. Maybe you learned to disappear into the feminine receptivity, surrender, silence. But real wholeness comes when these parts meet in harmony, when your fire dances with your water, when your logic serves your intuition, when your inner protector and inner nurturer sit at the same table, and in that balance, chasing stops, because you no longer operate from fracture. You no longer overdo to feel worthy. You no longer wait in passivity hoping to be chosen. Instead, you choose, you allow. You respond not from fear, but from fullness. The integrated self doesn't need to grasp or push. It holds, it trusts, it moves when called and stills when guided. And that's presence in its most sacred form. Not just standing in your power, but knowing when to lead and when to lean back, when to act and when to listen. That's not confusion, it's mastery. And people feel it, in your eyes, in your boundaries, in the way you say no with softness and yes with certainty. When you embody both the grounded masculine and the intuitive feminine, you become whole. And wholeness doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't beg, it invites. It doesn't conform, it aligns. So if you've ever wondered why you feel torn inside, why you crave action but long for rest, why you want to lead but also be held, it's not weakness. It's the call to integrate. Because you were never meant to live in half-light. You were always meant to hold both suns within you. And now is the time to let them rise together. At first, solitude feels like silence, like absence, like something or someone is missing. You sit in the quiet and wait for the noise to come back, for the phone to ring, for the space beside you to be filled, but then something unexpected happens. The longer you stay with yourself, the more you begin to hear what the noise had been covering, your breath, your thoughts, your truth. And suddenly, solitude transforms. It's no longer a void, it becomes a return, a sacred remembering. Because when you're truly alone, not lonely, but with yourself, you realize just how much of your life you lived trying to be chosen. How much of your worth was tied to attention, to companionship, to someone else's ability to reflect you back to yourself. But now, you're the reflection, the witness, the lover of your own presence. Solitude becomes a training ground, a refining fire. You learn what you actually like, not what you tolerated for connection. You learn what peace feels like, not the false peace of avoidance, but the deep exhale of no longer performing. And slowly, without trying, you begin to shift. You're no longer available for half-love, for one-sided relationships, for roles that cost you your soul. Because something new has rooted inside you, sovereignty. Sovereignty is when you stop outsourcing your value, when your identity is no longer up for negotiation, when love becomes a gift, not a lifeline. And in that space, connection becomes richer because you're not giving from emptiness. You're overflowing from wholeness. You're no longer afraid to lose someone because you've already found yourself. And that discovery, that unshakable union with your own being, that's the foundation of everything you've been seeking. Not another person, not another title. You, whole, sovereign, free. There is a shift that can't be faked, a click that happens deep in the soul. It's the moment you stop needing to prove who you are and start simply being it. You no longer search for mirrors. You no longer plead for validation. You no longer hustle for a seat at any table. Because you remembered you were always the damn table. And in that remembering, your energy transforms. Something softens. Something solidifies. You stop attracting from emptiness and begin attracting from essence. The world responds not to the version of you trying to be enough, but to the one who already knows she is. That's when synchronicities begin to show up. The text, the offer, the opportunity, the aligned relationship. Not because you chased it, but because you matched it. That's the secret no one tells you. The universe doesn't give you what you beg for, it gives you what you're a vibrational match to. And when you radiate worth, rootedness, peace, Life moves to meet you in that frequency. You stop pushing, you start pulling, you stop pleading, you start choosing. You walk into spaces and don't shrink. You speak without the tremor of needing to be understood. You live without apology. And that's magnetic, not because it's loud, but because it's true. Real attraction isn't created through image or effort. It's created through congruence. And when your internal knowing finally aligns with your external embodiment, people feel it. Opportunities find it. The right ones recognize it instantly, and the wrong ones fall away effortlessly. This isn't confidence built on ego. It's embodiment built on truth. It's what happens when you stop asking the world to tell you who you are, and finally, you tell yourself. That's when everything changes. That's when everything begins. You've spent years believing you had to add something to be worthy. A better title, a stronger voice, a prettier body, a busier calendar, more followers, more achievements, more proof. But what if nothing was ever missing? What if the entire time your power wasn't in becoming more but in remembering what you already are? Self-realization is not a construction, it's a homecoming. It's the gentle collapse of everything false. The peeling away of every layer that told you to be quieter, smaller, safer. It's the moment you stop striving to be seen and realize you were always visible to what mattered most, your own soul. And once you touch that truth once, you stop fixing, pleasing, proving you'll see it clearly. Your presence is the portal, not your effort, not your explanation, not your performance. Just the full, radiant, embodied you. The stillness, the power, the light that doesn't ask for permission to shine. That's the doorway. That's the signal to everything aligned with your highest self, the relationships that honor you, the opportunities that expand you, the paths that don't drain you but recognize you. Because life does not respond to your desperation. It responds to your alignment. It moves toward your energy the moment your energy stops reaching outward in fear and starts settling inward in truth. And in that moment the shift happens. Not in the world, in you. You stop asking, "What do I need to do?" and start living the question, "What am I already?" You stop waiting. You start allowing. You stop reaching for love like it's outside of you, and instead you become the source of it. That's when everything changes, not because you became someone new, but because you finally came home to yourself. So let this be the reminder. You don't need to do more to become magnetic. You need to be here. Fully, gently, unapologetically. Because when your presence becomes enough, everything that is meant for you begins to arrive, not with noise, not with force, but with the quiet certainty that you are no longer chasing anything because you are already whole. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.